Hey everyone, Dodler here. First off, I want to thank everyone for their amazing feedback and comments on my World of Ragnarok video. I've been really happy with the response to that. But one question I did get a lot of was, how did I make it? Now, I do post most of my progress on Twitter, but unless you've been following that for some time, it isn't a whole lot of help. So today, I thought I'd just take a little bit of time and explain exactly what I've built and how it works. So the easiest way to summarize is I've built my own Ragnarok client and server from scratch. The server itself is written in C# and the client is built in Unity. Now before I get too far here, I do need to make it clear, I've no plans on building or running any kind of private server. This is just something I'm doing in my spare time. Everything's pretty bare bones, and while there's a lot that doesn't work, I do kind of want to show off what I do have. As you can see, you can walk around, the monsters all run around, you can kill them, and you can level up. There aren't any skills, except for Firebolt. There's no drops, there's no stats. Well, there are stats, but you can't assign them, and there's not even any classes. There is a hotkey to heal yourself that works kind of like using a red potion, but again, there's no items in the game, so you actually just have unlimited uses of it. Now, while there's a lot still missing, everything that is here should feel pretty familiar. Monsters should move and act just as they did in the original, and while their numeric stats are a bit different than you might be used to, they are all pretty well balanced for these settings. Your character gets stronger as you level, and with how everything's set up, you can take a character from level 1 all the way through to 99 in just a few hours. And the reason I know it only takes a few hours is because I've done it a couple times when I've gotten really bored. Now, all the maps prior to the 5.0 Juno update are there, almost 250 of them actually, and for monster spawns, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I generally just took what I thought was the most interesting historical version of a map and used that. So earlier, I said that this was a proper client and server, and as you'd expect, that does mean that you can have multiple players connected at once. Right now, I don't know what the limit to the number of players would be. I've had up to 25 players connected at one time, but I'm pretty sure you could do quite a bit more. The netcode is all written using WebSockets, and while I don't have a working build of it to show you, with the help of Unity's WebGL feature, the client actually does fully run in a web browser. Now, as for multiplayer features, there's support for local chat and emotes, and because you can't actually party up, whenever a monster dies, just everyone on screen gets the full experience. So one feature I thought was pretty neat is that while the server's running, you can actually modify the scripts and configuration files. Here you can see that there's 100 porins on this map, Prontera Field 8, and I can just change it while it's running to 100,000 porins, and this happens. Now, the client isn't all too pleased by this. The server does a lot better. It's handling this at about 25-30 frames per second, which is still respectable, but the client doesn't like it. I actually think it's the volume of individual packets that's causing an issue, because I don't really have any mechanism to combine packets together. Either way, it's still doing pretty well. Now, I can actually just, again, go back on the server and change it back to 100, and on the client, type reload script, and boom, we're back to normal. One feature that I'm actually quite proud of, and that works really well, is my NPC scripting. Now right now in the game world, it's really only the Caphra staff that make use of it. All these other NPCs you see around here, you can't actually interact with them. They're just dummy NPCs to fill space for the World of Ragnarok video, right? And while the Caphra staff, they do work, as you can see, you can use them to teleport from town to town, just like you'd expect. But they don't really show off what the scripting system can do. It can do a lot more. So for that, I kind of want to show you some of my test scripts, because they can do some pretty neat things. So I'm going to start with what is probably the neatest test script I wrote, called the Geographer Snake Game. And as that very original name would imply, you control the snake of geographers using these 4 control NPCs in the top right to change its direction. And anytime the snake picks up pupa, it increases the snake's length by 5. The whole goal is to see how long you can make the snake before it either folds upon itself or runs into a wall. Now, the tricky part here is that these are real live geographers. If they kill you, you can't talk to the NPC anymore, and you lose control of the snake. Whoops. This is the code that actually runs this whole thing. It's about 115 lines long, in a custom scripting language that, when the server starts, actually gets cross-compiled into C# and then loaded as a DLL. Now, while I think you probably pull off this kind of script on one of the other RO servers, it wouldn't be very easy. Now, this script is just a really simple one called pouring fireworks. And the idea is that it spawns these NPCs randomly, and they create a expanding ring of pourings, and then kills them. It's kind of pointless, but it looks neat. Now, this last one is directly inspired by Final Fantasy XIV. In that game, there's a boss mechanic called Exaflare, which create these walking AoEs that move across the arena from one edge. They telegraph the direction they're going to go, and then they continually hit a line in that direction. They create kind of a wall that you have to weave between while you're fighting the boss. I honestly just wanted to see if it could work in Ragnarok, and for the most part it does. These are real AoEs. If they hit you, they hurt a lot. Yeah, just like that. And the whole thing was about only 50 lines. And I'm pretty confident that you couldn't do it in less on another RO server. So now let's dig a little bit into the server. Now this part's going to be a bit technical, so if you're less inclined to that, you may want to skip, but I'll try to keep it brief. So the server itself is written in just plain C# and uses ASP.NET WebSockets for communication. It runs at a dynamic frame rate instead of a fixed time step like regular RO, which honestly is probably a little less performant, but it would hide frame drops a lot better. This is C#, so there might be small spikes due to the garbage collector, but I do as much as I can to mitigate that. Going into the actual design, the Zone server has a singular top-level object called the world. Now the world has the network manager, which runs parallel to the game in its own thread, has the master list of entities that are active in the world, as well as a bunch of container objects called instances. Now, each instance contains a set number of maps and manages its own subset of entities that are borrowed from the world. Currently, I have the server split into about 20 instances, and it's built in a way that you could easily create new instances dynamically, kind of like RO's Memorial Dungeons. Now, the whole point of splitting the world into a number of instances is that each instance is actually designed to run in a single thread. Each frame, the server passes the instance list to a thread pool, where each list is run separately, but all of them in parallel to each other. The advantage of this is that there's no locking. You don't have to worry about thread safety at any point when performing combat calculations or anything like that, right? Anytime data needs to travel across instances, like say a player is moving to another map, these are stored as a request on the instance, and at the end of each frame, the server goes through all these requests and handles them on the main thread. So yeah, I think that's about all I really want to go over on the server. If you did want to dig deeper, if you wanted to take a look at the code, the whole thing is actually up on GitHub. You would probably need a high tolerance for jank, and a solid grasp of C# and Unity, but everything in this video you can actually just set up from what's in the GitHub. The only thing you would need is to bring your own extracted data.grf, as well as have the proper retained Korean file names. So with the client and server taken care of, let's take a look at the Unity side of things. Now, before I go too far, I do want to give a special shout out to the guys behind the RO browser project. Information on how to load Ragnarok's file formats is pretty hard to come by, and I'll be honest, I ended up lifting a lot of code wholesale from their project to get it to work. Their project is, frankly, one of the only ones I was able to find that had code that both worked and made sense to read. So thank you. Anyway, I currently have the project loaded in Unity here. I'm just going to walk you through importing a small map so it can show you a little bit on how that works. So now that it's loaded, you can see the map here, and there's no lighting information at all. Ragnarok uses light maps that show how the ground is lit, but I don't even bother loading those. They aren't very useful. See, the map files in Ragnarok also include the lights that they use to generate those light maps. They aren't actually needed for the client to work, but they are still there, and I use those to generate the new lights. So these lights are actually pretty interesting. It was really hard to actually get them to look like they did in the original. The solution I came up with through trial and error was actually just to have 2 lights for each light they had in the file. You can see there's just 2 stacked on top of each other, with one with half the radius. And combined, this actually gave really good results. Now let's actually bake the lights for this scene. The light baking process is a 2-step one. The first is the ambient occlusion. To do this, I disable all the lights in the scene, just max out the ambient color to solid white, and then actually just save that as a light map. Then I turn off the ambient color and render only the lights in the scene. And then with both those light maps, I actually just combine them to get a composite result. The ambient occlusion here is actually pretty subtle, so I'll just show you a little bit on what it's contributing. I have a slider in each scene that you can actually just use to adjust how much contribution the ambient occlusion provides. At 0, it's more or less how it looked in the original, and at max, you can see just what it's adding. I usually leave it at about half, but some maps it actually looks a little bit better with deeper shadows. Another way this differs from the original is, in the original only the ground is lit. Objects in the scene get no contribution from any of the lights. They are completely unlit except for the ambient color and the directional light. You can see this pad here in my scene has taken on a blue color because of the light above it. But in the original, it would just be gray. In most cases, this actually looks really good. But sometimes, because they weren't lit originally, they sometimes put the lights way too close. So I do have an option on a per object basis that I can use to actually scale down how much contribution they receive from the lights. So here, with this all the way down, this is how it actually would look in the original, and here it is with it back on. Now, baked lights only affect static objects, basically things that don't move. In order to light, say, this pad here as they rotate in the game, or even the players themselves, I use light probes. They're just kind of scattered about the map fairly evenly, and what they do is that they actually just store the information on what light hits it. You can see if I click the pad, you can see what the probes, you can see the color of the light, and then that is used to blend to give it a color. In fact, I should just log in the game because I'll show you how it actually looks on a character. Now, immediately in the center of the room, you can see that there's this small point where the center light shines brightest. If you move your character into it, you can see it light up, and then you lose that color when you step out. This also works for the colored lights. If you come up here, you get kind of a reddish tint. You can step on the pad where it's brightest, and you get a bit bright. Now, the main scene directional light also affects you, so you can see stepping into the shadow also darkens your character. And just poke around with some of the other ones. Up here, you get kind of a greenish hint. And then if we go back over here, it's a little bit more red, and you can see how that contributes. It's not excessive. It's trying to be quite subtle. It was really easy to have it just kind of wash out your character or break the look. So I figured that just this kind of subtle look was probably best. Another thing that was a little tricky to get working well was water. If you've played RO for some time, you probably noticed that things interact rather strangely with water, especially if you're using a visual effect that's partially transparent, like Energy Code or Two-Hand Quicken. The problem isn't really an easy one to solve. Both sprites and water are transparent, and if you're familiar with 3D rendering, you know transparent objects can't intersect without causing problems. So solving this problem isn't easy, but as you can see, when I move my character into the water, it looks alright. Additionally, the water level appears consistent on your character even if you adjust the height of the camera, which was a problem in the original. It also interacts somewhat decently with visual effects like firebolts here. And if you zoom in quite a bit, You can even see that the water level is not just straight, but even slightly curved with the sprite. So how does it work? Well, my solution is simply just not to have the water and player interact directly at all. See, let me adjust the color of the water here to make it a bit more clear. That's right. The sprites don't actually interact with the water. They're actually drawn in front of the water. When a character is close enough to interact with the water, they switch to a special shader that draws a fake water line on the sprite itself. To give you a better idea what's happening behind the scenes, let me just adjust the water setting to make it a little bit more funky. Then, we'll take a look at the frame debugger. What you see in here is a low resolution render pass that is actually rendering the water on screen with a special shader. The red and green colors here are actually storing the texture coordinates of the visible water at each point. And while you can't see it, the blue channel contains the world height at each point. Then, if we skip ahead here past the shadow passes and background, the sprite is rendered in front of the water, but by pulling the information from the water prepass, the shader can tell what parts of the sprite are below the water level, and if so, blend the current water texture using those coordinates. Now, some of you might be wondering why I actually store the world height of the water and not just use the depth buffer to tell if it intersects. Well, let me go into the scene view here while the game's running. Yeah, so you can see here the character actually appearing to stand vertically is actually also something that's being faked in the shader. So yeah, I'd say it's a pretty neat solution. The shader does do a little bit of heavy lifting, but as far as shaders go, it's not too bad. At least I think the results are worth it. So another spot I think I actually have a rather neat setup is for fog. Now, fog in the original game is actually really interesting because they don't really use it as fog, right? They use it kind of like a low-tech color grading. Back when the game was made using DirectX 7, you didn't really have a good way if you wanted to shift the colors of a scene, including all the visual effects and all that. But you could use fog, and it was practically free in terms of performance. Here in the Payon Caves, it gives the map its kind of a bluish look, miasma kind of look, and Geffen Tower, it makes it kind of purplish. But there's a big problem with fog, and it was if you changed how far you were zoomed in, it changed how much it affected the colors, and if you zoomed all the way out, it kind of got in the way. Now, as you can see, I've done it a bit different. In fact, it's kind of hard to tell there's even fog being used at all. It's a pretty neat trick, and for that, I'll have to show you how it looks in the scene view. So what I did is that I took the original fog values and kind of assumed that they were intended for about 80% zoomed out. And then I increase or decrease the power of the fog based on how far the camera is, so that the actual contribution of the fog is identical at the point of your character, no matter how far you're zoomed in. You can't really see it in-game at all, but it's really obvious with the scene view. It's kind of neat, right? Now, for my World of Ragnarok video, I did use the same thing, but sometimes, the camera would pass over lumpy ground, or the height would change a lot. It's things that wouldn't happen normally in the game. So I do have a way to just control the fog settings for when I was recording, so I could just change it to whatever I want at any point in the video. Speaking of which, I did promise I'd show you how I made those flyover clips, so let's start going in that direction. Now, I'm sure most of you recognize Old Payon. While I think New Payon is a nicer place to live, from a gameplay standpoint, I don't think you can beat just having one big central square for people to gather. Now, this map isn't complete. My old client did have two missing models on this right here, showing if I turn on the walkable areas, you can see there should be a building here. And there's a second one here, too. Do be sure to let me know if you have either of those missing models. Now, to go off on another tangent, this whole project actually started as a map editor, and some of that still works. The whole thing kind of barely functions, but you can use it in a pinch to make small changes. You can adjust the height of the ground and a few other things. It's not super useful, but it did come in handy sometimes when I needed to try to connect maps together. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's actually just get started. I need to make a few small changes. I need to add the starting scene to the project, kind of split the view, and set this off for the inspector. And we need to create a new animation clip that we're going to use for our camera. I'll just call it pay on test. And yeah, we'll see if we can get a good shot here. In the bottom right, you can see the phone control settings I was saying, and we'll change the camera to something to look closer to RO's 15 degree FOV. So I just hit record here in the animation window, and I'm just using Control-Shift-F, and it snaps the current object to the camera. And so I'm just basically teleporting the camera in the scene to match the scene view. And all I need to do is change the keyframe to move the camera to where I want to be and just snap again. Keep doing this, and yeah, there you go. Looks like looks decent start. We'll just make something quick here. We'll just kind of do a weird squiggly line loop through here. Go off to the right, and then do a kind of a zoomed out shot at the end, which I did probably a little too often in my videos, but it's a nice view anyways. Just final shot, and that looks good. Play it. Seems okay. It doesn't need to be perfect, but that should work. Now we do need to make a few final changes. I need to make a change on the server to increase the max view distance, because it'd be a shame to not have all the monsters on the map. I do need to stop the server though. Just change that to 210. That'll be fine. And we'll start the server again. This top secret view of the server starting up. And there we go. And we'll hop over to the game. Yeah, everything looks good. So, yeah, let's get started. Now, I can just I don't have a warp set up, but I can just use a console command to teleport directly, and I'm just gonna use some GM's commands. So increase our speed, hide ourselves here, and then we're gonna make things a little lively. There's no NPCs on the map, so just gonna create some Moonax. Why not? Just gonna run around and place them all over the place. And how about we get some Bond Goons as well? Bond Goon, and we'll place some more over here. Just kind of mix them up, and some up top. Yeah, that looks good. So I think that's everything we need. Now I just need to hit F5, and boom, it starts the animation. And now I have two hotkeys. F5 starts the animation, and F6 actually pipes it directly into FFmpeg. So basically just outputs everything you see here. The nice thing about that is that while recording, if the frame rate drops below 60 FPS, the game will just slow down, so the recording will still look good. And yeah, you can just kind of zoom out shot, and we're done. That's it. I can hop back to my character here, and yeah, I just basically did that for 2.5 hours of footage, and that's all it took. Alright, so extending things off, I'm just going to show off a couple of the combined maps I made that I used in the video. Now, one thing I should make clear before I actually go into this is that these maps aren't actually functional. Like, this combined map set is actually just this map with a bunch of other maps just kind of copy pasted and edited to connect, right? I did do a few small tricks in the video. At the start of the video, there's a camper snap in town here, but that's actually placed on this map. I couldn't get too in depth because the server won't actually let me place NPCs out of bounds. And, I mean, I could change it, but the client wouldn't know what height to display it at, right? So I was generally just limited with NPCs within the map bounds of the original map. So in the arrow video, I start here, can pan out, and then I switch to a shot, and then pan backwards. It looks pretty good, honestly. I thought it was a really good start to the video. But just to ruin it for you, though, I'm going to point out all the things I did wrong, and all the things that you may not have noticed. Now, for some reason, when I combine these maps, it creates these weird artifacts along their boundaries, and I never did finish it or figure it out. No idea what causes it, but it is pretty consistent on a number of the maps that I tried to combine. And you might notice that the fog is pretty high. It's lower than it would be in the actual game, but it actually looks good in the distance. But if you turn off the lighting, fog, you see that everything's not quite right over here. See, while a lot of these maps connect, look like they'd connect really well, there's a lot of small differences, like the water level in Islud doesn't match the water level in Frontera Field. So in order to hide this, I just kind of added this horizontal slab of water, and the fog just kind of hides that. They don't connect in other weird ways too, like the bridges are different sizes. This map just doesn't have a back, right? This map connects actually pretty well. And I'll just show you a little bit on how those connections were made. So if I pull this back here, you can see I used the map editor feature to effectively lower the ground on this side and lower the ground on this side, and then just kind of jammed the two together. Deleted all the walls on this side of the map, and then just there we go, and just connected them like that. Pretty easy. The next map we're going to take a look at is the Morok one. Now, I struggled a lot making this work. It looks decent, and I think the segment really turned out really well in the video. But again, if you know where to look, there's all kinds of issues. So I started the video like right about here. Actually had a kind of blowing sand effect. I just kind of pans over quickly, making sure not to look at whatever this disaster is. No matter where I place the camera, except exactly on the boundary, right on the boundary, it kind of looked alright. So that's where I started. This pyramid is one that I added in order to hide whatever this is. And so the camera did pan over here. Notice the camera didn't linger on this side of Payon, and that's because, Morok, sorry. It didn't linger on this side because, again, it's got one of these weird seams. I don't know why Unity Light Mappers does this, but I just solved the issue by not pointing the camera at it. There's a bit of a mess here, and this actually shows in the video, but again, the camera paths are more about what I don't want to show rather than what I really want to show. So the camera comes up here, can't see the line there, and it kind of loops around while trying not to look directly at that mess. And these two maps actually connect pretty well. Sort of. There's still a height difference, right? But actually, I guess that could be lined up a bit better. Let's see, that's more on 12. So yeah, it would be a bit better like this, right? But it's hard to notice that. Again, I can pull them back. You can see I deleted all the walls from this map. I actually just fully deleted a couple segments of this map and just push them together, lowering this. This connection actually looks pretty good. Now this camera comes up here, tries very hard not to look at anything down here because these maps did not connect very well at all, and I didn't really have a lot of options. So I tried to cover it up as best as I could, but it's like something's going on here, and it's not good. You can see up here, these maps, actually, the pyramid map, the ruins, is probably the worst one because this map has these two walls from on Morrock, right? And you can tell that this map is supposed to be directly connected, but if you do directly connect them, then nothing lines up. This should line up here. Can I? Which one are you? It should be like this, right? But I just decided not to point the camera at this ever. There are still some issues. Again, Light Mapper seems really didn't like these maps. There's another one out here, a little bit less obvious. This is pretty ugly. And yeah, like, if this map is connected to Morrock, this map just gets in the way. I deleted a big part of this map and just kind of did what I could to make it fit. A bit of a mess though. Still, I think this particular segment turned out really well. And again, even if it is kind of ugly, it is nice to see how they connect. Now, lastly, I'm going to show you one that I didn't get to use in the video because it's really neat, but my computer absolutely hates this file for some reason. Well, I know exactly why. It's a 2 GB scene file, and that's just objects in the scene. And I tried to combine the entire world map. I got only about this far before Unity and my computer just completely explode. So it's got Payon, Morrock, Frontera. Would have been nice to add in Geffen and Aldebaran, but for now this is like my computer's just chugging. I hope this doesn't wreck the recording. But I'll show you a little bit of this. I really wanted to do Flyover, but again, like, these aren't real maps, so I couldn't have NPCs or monsters in them, but it would still make a good Flyover. Now this is actually the one I used in the video. This connection looked really good, but I did have to do quite a bit of work in order to make that happen. Where are you? Alberta. So I pull that across. You can see. So this map actually had part of Alberta on it, and they actually line up pretty well. I had to remove some parts, and some weird things like the gates were different sizes. Like, they're twice as big on the inside as on the outside, I think. But and over here, I just wholesale deleted large sections that were duplicated. And there's, you know, a few weird things. There's again weird slants and something over here. But all in all, it worked pretty well. And yeah, let's just take a quick look here. Field, poison spores with really annoying dragon tails, wolves, The new Edgar map. Greatest Generals. Bigfoots and Dokibis. The old Edgar map. Over here you got the Sohi map with the Wanderer. And like, you can see, like, these maps, they connect. Sorta. Well, these ones actually connect really well. New Payon. It tries. Again, different heights. Different bridge sizes. That's a common theme. These maps, again, like, it's a big height difference, but otherwise, like, if you looked at it top down, it looks good, right? It looks intended. These are the guild realms. You can see here, like, these maps, they look like they were intended to be connected. And honestly, what I think is that they started off with like a sketch of like the entire map, and then they would just take a part of the image, just drop it down, and then they would build the map on top of it so that it kind of fits as a part of the whole. And I think that's why, you know, why the actual edges of the map all look like they line up, but they do absolutely weird things in terms of height and position. So we got the Marok maps, the Frioni map. It's got some weird coloring. You don't really see like the height difference on some of these maps, right? Assassin Guild. These are some weird maps. I think they might have just made them and just be like, just adjusted them after the fact. But this map here is just wild. The whole thing's practically diagonal. But it's kind of funny because you don't really see that in game. Hodes. These are the maps that are basically unconnected, and you can see right here how it would look if they connected properly. And these two maps look really good, but again, you got these. This looks like the outer wall of Morok. It might not actually be. It might be kind of like a different, but like these two trees are the same. This building is the same with the trees, so I'm pretty sure they're intended to be the same. You can see they're kind of duplicated on both sides of the wall. And when I combined them, I just deleted all that. Yeah. Next, Golem map. Another Antel entrance. And Porian Island. Hey, you can just zoom it all the way. Islud. Prontera fits weirdly in the world. Like, all of these maps have outer walls of Prontera, and none of them are anywhere near the actual size of the Prontera wall. And over here, this is just like they clearly didn't try to make them connect. And I still don't know why the guild realm is in here. Should have stuck it off the side or something. But anyways, yeah. So this is maybe one day I'll try to do something with this, but again, my computer really doesn't like this, and anytime I try to add more maps, it's just it has problems. So yeah, I guess that's it. This was the project. As I mentioned, the whole thing's up on GitHub. You can take a look. There's some instructions on how to set it up if you really want. I don't recommend it if you're not like really comfortable with Unity or C#, because quite likely you're gonna have to make some changes in order to even get it to work. But yeah, it's there if you want it. So yeah, and again, thank you for watching my videos. I have a blast doing it. So take care.